Unfortunately, I was busy all day and didn't get here until the very end of the day, so I missed the concrete trucks once again. But if you remember what it looked like earlier this week, there were still forms on the footing for the footing concrete, and so those have been stripped, and the wall forms were installed this morning, and the concrete was poured to fill the walls this morning. And so that's what you see behind me. So tomorrow the concrete guys will be back to strip these forms off the walls. And if you're wondering, why doesn't the wood stick to the concrete? It's because they treat it. They spray all the wood with this stuff. They use this stuff. It's called Clean Strip J2. And this is just a chemical that they spray on all the wood, on all the forms, so that when the concrete dries, they can pull their forms off. And as it says on their longer form life, it makes it so they can reuse the wood on multiple houses. You can imagine how expensive it would get having to, buy all this wood, on every single house over and over and over again. It gets super expensive. So they use this stuff so they can reuse their wood over and over again. And you know what's funny? I never looked at this close before, but it says it is not a regulated material. And I actually can't find anywhere on here what the chemicals actually are inside this stuff. But it's super toxic. It says do not breathe it, do not, be careful with it. But that's what they use, form release agent Clean Strip. Yeah, that form strip solution stuff is super strong. You can smell it. It actually smells kind of like diesel fuel. And I think I've been told before by some concrete contractors that in the past that's what they used. It was just straight diesel fuel that they would soak their forms in, and then that's what they used. So maybe it's something similar to that. I don't know. But I do know that all this wood for all these forms is super saturated with this stuff. And I've climbed over these walls a few times today to look at some stuff, and my hands are all greasy, and so I don't know what it is, but it does its job. But you can see, as I said yesterday, so behind me are all of the footings that are just in the field, in the center of the house, and then around the perimeter you can see that they built those walls. So they put the forms and they built the walls right on top of the perimeter footings. So you can see all the way around that just the outline of the house has walls built. And the reason that they do it this way is because it's more expensive to pour concrete than it is to build walls out of wood. So on the exterior, around the perimeter where it really matters, they pour concrete because it's stronger. But to save money and because it's not necessary for the engineering and for strength, they just on the footings that are in between, they just build little short walls out of wood that go underneath the floor, and that helps support it that way. So all of this stuff is just a calculation that the engineers do, and wherever there needs to be concrete, there is concrete, and where they can get away with just using wood, they use wood. The forms have been removed. Check that out. The concrete foundation is finished, completely finished. There is more concrete to come, but it's called flat work, not foundation work. So the flat work is like the driveway, the patios, and all that stuff. So there is more concrete work to come, but for now, the foundation's done. All the concrete is poured. And that's what it looks like without all the wood forms on it. So I wanted to show you, if you've ever seen a foundation like this that hasn't been covered up with dirt yet and backfilled, you probably notice all this black stuff where the footing meets the walls. And what that is it's just liquid asphalt. And so what happens is when you pour concrete, if you don't pour all of the concrete at the same time, then it creates what's called a cold joint. So if you remember, we poured the footings first, which are the part that are underneath, and then we poured the walls second. So the footings were already dry when we poured the walls. And so even though, the semi-liquid concrete was poured, you'd think it would like seal and kind of become one. It doesn't. So that they're connected to each other, but the seal is not perfect. So there's what's called a cold joint between the footing and the wall, and all that means is that it's just not sealed very well, and so water can easily pass through that crack or that joint. So what they do is they come after they strip the wood off, they come through and so they put on this liquid asphalt that is supposed to seal it. Now, full disclosure, this is not waterproof, okay? It's not. It's called dam proofing, and so it helps to resist water, but it is absolutely not waterproof. Concrete is porous. This liquid asphalt stuff is not. It's not perfect. It's not elastic, and so if there's one thing that concrete is guaranteed to do, it will crack, okay? All concrete cracks, it always cracks. So even if it's a huge crack, it's a problem, but concrete just cracks by nature. And so it's not super worrisome, but what happens is concrete gets these little micro cracks. Concrete is porous anyway, but over time it'll shrink and expand and all that stuff, so it gets these little cracks. And because this asphalt stuff is not elastic, it also cracks. It cracks with the concrete, and so then water can get through there. And before that concerns you, you think, oh well, that must mean there's all this water under my house. There may be, but it's actually not the end of the world. So there's another solution to this. So when water gets on the inside, and it will, and I don't mean like a lake of water under your house, okay? I mean like the soil gets damp, and then as it evaporates, it creates water vapor under your house, which can cause mold, right? So we have a two-part system. So one, we do this dam proofing, so we put this liquid asphalt on the outside, and that helps seal it up a little bit. But then on the inside, before the framers start, building the house on top of the foundation and everything, they actually go through and put what we call vapor barrier, which is just really thick black plastic, and that covers the entire crawl space. And it actually goes all the way up onto the walls. So it coats all the dirt, and then it comes up and wraps the walls and sits up here. And so it creates, so the whole inside of a crawl space ideally would be sealed with that plastic. And it's not perfect either. Water can still find its way through and stuff, but what it does, it's called vapor barrier, right? So it doesn't stop the dirt under your house from being wet or there being water that builds up underneath your house. But what it does is it keeps it from evaporating and creating vapor, which then turns into mold. But once the framers start, I'll get under the house and show you the crawl space and show you what that vapor barrier looks like. But for now, this is the state of the house. The foundation's done, the dam proofing is done, and so if you're wondering what's next comes the utilities. And what that means is that, when they build a neighborhood or build in a city or wherever, they have utilities going underground through everything, right? Gas and power and all that stuff. And so the guys that do the dirt work, the excavators, they come, so when the foundation's done like it is at this point, they'll come and they'll put in, they'll connect all of the city utilities, so the underground sewer and gas and electricity, and they bring it to the house or next to the house so that it's ready to be connected to the house, if that makes sense. So that's what's going to happen tomorrow. So those guys are going to come tomorrow and they'll attach the utilities. They'll bring the utilities from the street to the house, and then they'll start backfilling. So this area right here next to the foundation, backfilling just means they're going to bring dirt and fill it back in. They'll backfill it. So they took the dirt out and now they're going to come back and fill it. So pretty self-explanatory term. So here's just a little up-close shot of what the dam proofing looks like. So it's just this nasty, smelly, black liquid. And they don't actually do it everywhere, so you can see it kind of finishes there. But that's because this is the garage. So the inside of the garage will all be filled in with dirt, which is why it doesn't matter that they poured a bunch of their extra concrete inside here, because it'll all just get buried with dirt. But they only need the dam proofing on the parts of the house that will be inhabited, so they have a crawl space on the other side. So in there, there'll be the crawl space, so that's why they had to do the dam proofing on this side, to keep water from getting into the crawl space. They don't need it on this side because it's going to be filled in with dirt anyways, and it'll be under the garage, under a concrete slab. And what's cool is that you can actually see how waterproof it already is. I don't know how difficult it is to see on camera, but there are little puddles of water that are just sitting on this tar. It just rained, so everything's freshly wet. But anyway, you can see little puddles of water just sitting on here, not soaking in. And if it were sitting on concrete, you would see it would soak in slowly, but it would soak into the concrete, and it'd be a darker, damp color. But when it's on the asphalt, it just sits there in puddles. It'll sit there until the sun evaporates it. All right, so the other thing I wanted to show you were all these bolts. So if you've ever seen a concrete before they start framing, you probably noticed all these bolts sticking out and all these threads. And so what they are, they're called J bolts. And so you know what a J looks like, right? The reason it's called that is because that's how they're shaped. So these bolts, while you can just see the top of them, they're actually really long and they have a J shape on the bottom, and they set them into the concrete. So it's kind of like a fish hook. So they get set into the concrete when it's wet, and so when it dries, it's like a hook set in the middle of the concrete so you could never pull it out, right? And so that's how they're designed. And their function is that essentially your foundation is one, it serves many purposes, but two mainly. One, it's something solid to build on so your house doesn't settle too much and cause problems with, with cracking and things like that from settling. But two, it's also meant to stop your house from like blowing over, and these J-bolts are what prevent that from happening. So when the framers come through, they actually, the very first piece of wood that they put on all this stuff, they actually have to drill holes through that bottom piece of wood that every single one of these bolts has to come through. And then they put a big washer and a nut on it. So like these little ones, so you can see these little ones have like these nuts on them right now. So they'll put these big old washers on there, and then they'll put those nuts on and crank them down super, super tight. And then they attach all the rest of the house to those bottom plates, those bottom pieces of wood that are attached to these J-bolts. And it makes it so the walls can't pick up, right? So the footings help keep it so the house can't move down, and these J-bolts in the walls help it so the house can't lift up. So they form kind of a perfect combination for making it so your house does not go anywhere. Anyway, those are the two main functions of a foundation: to keep your house from moving down and to keep it from moving up. Well, that is it for today. Foundation's ready and ready for utilities, which will go in tomorrow. And at the beginning of next week, the excavators will come back and they'll start backfilling. So they'll start pushing in all this dirt and getting it ready for the next concrete pour. But that will be flat work. So like I said, that'll be like the driveway and the patios and the sidewalks and all that kind of stuff, which will happen towards the end of next week. I know it's been a little boring so far watching all this stuff happen, but the framers will start in probably 10 days or so, and the house will really start coming together and moving quick. So that's when it'll get exciting. But just make sure you check in next Tuesday to see what it looks like when all the dirt is pushed back in and everything gets backfilled and ready for the flat work concrete. I'm Jake Wilkins with Alturas Homes. Thanks for watching. See you next time.